Hey guys, welcome back. So good to have you in the studio with me today. You're watching Windows to Heaven Art, and I am Stephen Cooley. So in this video, we're going to be painting a seascape with really unique lighting. So I feel like it's going to be a learning curve in that respect. But the size of the canvas is this right here. I'm going to be narrating, but not necessarily talking about everything that I'm doing as you're watching me paint. But if you do have any specific questions, the comment section is a great place for me to maybe answer those specific questions. So hit me up in the comments if you want to know something a little bit more in depth as to my painting process or what I'm doing that you're wondering about. So let's jump straight into it. I like my coffee black, and I like it strong in the morning. You gotta have black coffee. So I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna head out to the studio. But before I start on the painting project, I gotta take care of some snow. Because we had a very heavy and very late snowfall this spring, which has threatened to break some branches. So I got to actually shake off these pine boughs before I start painting. It is super crazy that we got this much snow at this point in April. It actually it broke a record for the area. With that taken care of, I'm going to get myself into the studio and get started on this painting project. Now, I do have a reference photo that I'm going to be putting directly onto the canvas via digital projector. So once I get the sketch on, I'll be able to have a pretty accurate representation of the design that I created. So that's what you see me doing here. I'm just basically tracing all of the major lines and shadowed areas and light areas and just creating a map to paint over the top of. And there you can see the sketch. And now after the sketch has dried, I'm going to start painting over this previously toned canvas and get the block in painted on. So as I said, I had previously toned the canvas, and the paint that I pretty much always tone my canvases with is burnt sienna. Now, when I'm painting, I like to generally start with what's furthest away and work my way forward. And as you can see, there is some kind of misty slash shadowy background coastline hills, and these light portions, kind of these light splotches on the hillside, is where I'm going to put in my kind of dappled light, as you can imagine, would be breaking through the clouds and hitting the hillside. So right there you can see that I have the basic block in for that. So it's starting to take shape as I move my way forward, and then also there is some distant ocean water back there that I painted in really light because it's catching some of that sunlight as well. So this painting was a little bit more challenging, and I suppose that could be in part because I hadn't painted on a canvas in a little while. But I think the main reasons were two reasons. Number one, because the composition itself presented some difficulties for me, but also the lighting was very specific that I wanted to convey, and I really had to think a lot about it, and it slowed me down quite a bit because I wanted to get it just right. So the composition was developed, but it ended up evolving and changing throughout the painting process. You'll see that come out as I get more into the painting. But the lighting was something that I wanted to focus a lot on in this painting, something that I really liked about it. And so I wanted to make sure that I got it exactly the way I wanted it. And you can already start to see, even in the block in here, how I have set the mood of the weather being kind of misty and obscured. And you get a picture of that with our only view of the sky up in the right-hand corner, where you get this little sliver of the sky coming in. And it's very hazy, and the clouds are looking very misty, and the colors that I'm choosing are very muted, and it just gives a kind of an overcast feel to it. But then at the same time, you have these bright points of light coming in on that hillside like I was talking about earlier. And so that's some direct sunlight coming through. And then you also have some deep shadowed areas, like on the left side of the coastline, where it's just very dark and shadowed. And so there's the finished block in. But I wanted to just keep that overcast, misty lighting with sunlight breaking through the clouds at different points consistent throughout the whole painting. So I got those three kind of main lighting situations going on the hill in the background, but I also kind of have those three main lighting situations going on in the foreground as well. And I really had to slow down my painting process and think about how I was going to make that work, because when you're doing a block in, which at this point I had already completed, your block in is going to set up the foundation, or rather I guess I would say that the block in is the foundation and is going to set up the rest of the painting and inform the rest of the painting. Everything that you paint on top of the block in is influenced by the block in. So I found myself really trying to anticipate what would come next before I would actually do it. And I kind of started to get clued in on this theme with my painting, where I would be able to stay on track and paint exactly what I wanted to paint if I could see what would come next in the painting before I would actually paint it. And that sounds a little bit confusing, but basically what it breaks down to is I found it easier to paint what I wanted to paint when I could imagine it before I painted it. And I really started to learn that when I was developing the flow and the movement of the water. Because so often I have seen other artists paint or seen their work and thought, I can do that. You know, I see it all right before my eyes and I really like it, and then I think, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I jump into a painting and draw a blank. And so I would wonder, how can I get that element that I like in their painting into mine to some extent? And with this painting, I found out that I was able to paint the things that I wanted to paint, like the movement of the water, for example. If I could look at what I had already laid down and imagine what it was starting to look like, if I could see where it was going before it was there, then I could paint it. But around this point, I took a photo of my painting and I had to jump into GIMP and start working with the composition digitally, and I tried a few different things out just because I was struggling with what the painting was going to look like, and I just didn't like a few things. So I landed on that last photo. I was like, okay, this is where I'm gonna take the painting, just because, like I said, I just, as I was painting it, I just started to think, I'm not sure if I like the composition anymore. So I had to try a few different things out, And that's what you see me doing here is I'm working on the rock a little bit more. That was kind of the main issue I had, was this rock. In my original composition design, I had the rock a little bit farther down in the water. But like you saw those images of me just messing around with the image digitally, I decided to break the rock up into kind of one single rock sticking out of the water. But then here, as you see me painting on the rock, I just felt that the painting was better balanced if, just like the land above, the rock comes outside of the painting, being cut off by the edges of the canvas, instead of being totally inside the painting. And for me, making these kinds of decisions for the composition is so much easier when I'm able to take a picture of my painting and start tweaking it digitally. I can try a lot of different things out without actually messing around with my actual painting. It allows me to explore a lot of different possibilities. Another thing that I feel like I was able to delve into in this particular painting is simply exploring the development of my own style. Because each artist has a unique God-given style that is totally unique to them. Something that only they possess. A type of way to paint that nobody else can. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't be influenced by other artists. I have a lot of different artists that I learn from and even will draw from to create my own art. But you'll never be able to paint something like somebody else. And I guess I should rephrase that a little bit and say exactly like somebody else, because you can paint something in a similar way to somebody else that you really like and are learning from, but you'll never paint something exactly like somebody else, just like they will never be able to produce artwork exactly like you. So you got a corner on the market with your own unique style. And there are basically 7 different widely known art styles, which include realism, which is basically the unembellished portrayal of the world around you, life as it is. And it has been said, if you can easily identify the subject of the painting and it's conveyed in a realistic way, then you're likely looking at realism. And then there is impressionism, which breaks down the view into different shapes. It's basically a compilation of small visible brushstrokes with a focus on light and atmosphere, and very often is painted with a lot of pastel colors. And then there is expressionism, which focuses on conveying emotion with often intensified color, strong lines, and with images that are distorted or exaggerated, with free brushwork, often heavy applications of paint, and an emphasis on seeking to express personal interpretations or emotions. And then there is photorealism, which is the way it sounds. It's basically to paint in such a realistic way where it's hard to tell the painting is a painting. And then there is pop art, which is kind of cartoon-like and a bit commercial looking. And then there is the abstract, where reality is broken down and is more, the painting's more gestural and ranges from completely non-objective to having some objects in it that are identifiable. And then there is surrealism, which is the last one, delving into the subconscious mind, which started out kind of as a art rebellion against society and against contemporary thought. So I just was looking into these different styles, thinking about my own style, and just getting a little bit of a dose of what other people have painted, just so I could kind of think about my own style. Because I feel like my own style is, well, obviously it is constantly getting perfected and constantly improving as I, move on and continue painting. I personally don't like surrealism or abstract, and I don't care for pop art that much, or even really photorealism. I initially started out really liking photorealism and loving the challenge of it and wanting to paint as realistic as I could. But the more I got into it, I just held the opinion of just if you could take a photo of, let's say, a tree and then paint almost exactly that photo out, what would be the point of that? Because you have the photo already. So if it looks so much like a photo, why not just take a photo of it? And so for me, I wanted to convey something that you can't take a photo of, and that kind of became my aspiration for my art. Is I wanted to be able to get at something that is deeper than simply what you can see. And if you want to know a little bit more about why I do art, you can obviously look into my channel a little bit more. I have some write-ups in the About section that you can look at if you're curious. But yeah, I gravitate towards realism and impressionism, and there are some things about expressionism that I like. For instance, I like to use a lot of strong colors in my art, and I like the idea of painting more into something than simply what you can see. But as I look into the different styles, I think I tend to gravitate towards realism and impressionism. I like realism simply because I really like the theme that is in creation that will point towards God and His beauty that's already there, and to use that to convey in more unique ways, because God is endless, His beauty. And so that's what I like about realism. And I like impressionism because, well, I guess because it's not afraid to stray a little bit from simply and strictly painting exactly what you see every time. So it's kind of, and I have to think about the impressionism a little bit more. I've actually never gone to any formal art school or anything. I'm totally self-taught, so these styles are actually still somewhat new to me, and I have, I guess, a little bit of exploring to do. But impressionism, I guess I tend to like a lot of impressionistic paintings that are able to break out a little bit from painting strictly what you can observe with your eyes. Painting something in a unique way. That's what I like about impressionistic paintings, is they're able to capture a mood of something, or hint at something in a little bit of a more unique way than how you would see it every time if you looked at it in a photograph. There's a lot more that could be talked about and explored in this topic of styles and, kind of how you paint and why you paint. And who knows, I may do a video on that at some point. But as you watch me paint, just know that there's so much more to it than learning how to apply paint to a surface. And at this point, I am nearing the end, just about done with the painting. I have a few more details to put on, which is primarily taking the form of adding these little marks of basically pure titanium white, because I want to really light up that area of the wave where the sunlight is hitting it directly. And you notice I didn't put any of those marks in the areas of the water that are being shadowed by probable cloud cover. So I am picking and choosing where I want my brightest light to be. And it will help finish off that effect that I want to give of this lighting where you got overcast skies, but also pinpoints, sunbeams maybe, of that direct sunlight breaking through. It's actually funny how long the detail process takes, even though you are painting tiny areas, whereas the block-in actually goes the quickest, even though you're painting over the entire canvas. So if you are wondering why your detail stage is taking so long, don't be afraid of that, because it takes a long time. It's time consuming to put in all those details and really think about them. This painting, as you may have guessed with how long it's taken me to put out this video, took a long time because there was a lot of details, but also, as I mentioned before, there was a lot of planning and tweaking that took place. If you've watched any of my videos before, you may have heard me talk about how I think that simply watching somebody paint is one of the best ways to learn how to do it yourself. I do talk about that a lot, but that is basically how I have learned to do it myself, is by observation. I observe other people's finished works, I see them paint, and that's really how I learn. Okay, so I'm going to call it finished. Well, that sums it up for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you next time, and until then, God bless you guys. We'll see you later.